Hi everyone, I'm Harv, Ian Harvey, founder of Collective Intelligence, and this is Stuff That Matters Now. Hey, welcome back everybody. I am in Hamilton this morning. It is a beautiful day and I'm interviewing two people. She's very, very complex. I'm interviewing Erana Severne and Erana Severne-Takataka. Yeah? Two people. One's married, one's not. Good morning, Erana.
Kia ora.
We thought we better start press go because Erana and I were just shooting the breeze. I thought we've got to finish this podcast before we've even started. Erana, it's lovely to see you again. And we bumped and we saw Brogan. That was an added bonus, and Brogan was one of our scholarships, and I haven't seen Brogan for a wee while, so that was an added bonus this morning. But this morning we're focusing on you and your favourite subject, you.
Oh, kia ora.
No, seriously, Erana, I thank you for your time. Where should we start?
Where would you like to start?
Who are you?
Who am I? Well, that is complex. Who am I? My name is Erana. My whānau whakapapa from Tūwhare tō Ngāpuhi and Ngāti Paniapoto. I'm a mama. I've got a beautiful 2-year-old daughter and a 6'5" gorgeous husband. And I'm currently an operations manager at the Wise Group. I like to call myself sitting on the cusp,
Of
in
what?
the grey.
Of what?
Of just whatever. I like to sit right on the boundary of wherever I can be. Yeah.
And the husband, the 6'5" husband, stop showing off.
Yeah.
Is Tongan.
Yes.
How does that work, Erana? Because you're Maori Pākehā, marrying a Tongan. How does that work?
Well, it works really well. I think there are probably, I always explain it like our po are the same. So when it comes to whānau, when it comes to giving back, when it comes to the really important things in life, we're very aligned in that space. But there are differences between Pacifica and Māori. But actually, he's like a massive introvert, and I'm a total extrovert. And he's like 7 out of 10 execution. I call him like bubble popper, He's a bit of a bubble popper. And so I'll be like, this could be amazing, we could do this and this. And he's like, these are 10 reasons why that wouldn't work. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it's beautiful. And we have the house behind his mum. So his father passed away, so we take care of his mum, and that's kind of just something I knew from the get-go, that we are responsible to take care of the wider whānau unit. That's something I understand anyway through being Māori, but that's probably something that's a little bit different too. We have a little kind of papakainga. My sister-in-law's right next door. Yeah, we've got a bit of a team.
And tell us about the wedding.
Oh, the wedding was beautiful. So the wedding was interesting because we broke it into 2 components. So what we realised really quickly was that the wedding is actually nothing to do with us. That actually the wedding is for the parents. And so what we found was we were the first to get married kind of out of our line. And when we were planning it, his mum's like, I've invited the entire church. And like everyone's got like 10 children. And so it's like, okay, our plans were going a bit out the window, and then everyone was wanting their own piece of it or wanting it their way. And so pretty much I spoke to Longo and I just said, hey, we're smart. We should be able to figure this out. Like, everyone can get what they want. So we actually decided to have 2 weddings. We call it our Palangi wedding and our Tongan wedding. So our Palangi wedding was small. It was about 250. And that's just our immediate family members and a few friends. And we kind of, that was just a small intimate one. And then we had our Pacifica one, which was like no invites. And anyone turns up, there were like 500 seats and there weren't enough seats. And there were like suckling pigs on the table. Our wedding cake was stood up by cans of corned beef. And all the aunties would tell me, oh, you're lucky, those are $40 a tin, so... and yeah, it was beautiful. It was really interesting though. One of the things I did notice is, like Māori, we don't tend to take the kai away afterwards. But in the Tongan culture, the nannies will come out with big polystyrene boxes and take all the food away after. And it's important to make sure you have food to take or that's left over. So all my Māori whānau were like, what's going on when the event finishes and then all these polystyrene boxes come out and people start putting whole pigs into them, and
our food is being stolen.
Yeah, totally. And it was really cool. It was a beautiful way, I think, to celebrate. And what we realised was, we wanted everybody to have their part. It's not so much just about us. Yeah, we realised that.
So, Erana, when I first met you, I'm just trying to think. That was through scholarship. I'm trying to remember, what were you doing then? What was your work then?
I think when you first met me, I was at Waikato DHB in the Māori Health Unit.
That's right.
Yeah, so I was doing some mahi there around healthy homes, and I was kind of leading that project from the ground up. Yeah.
And because I remember that work. And the ground you were breaking, because some of the things you were doing there were maybe not revolutionary, but it was working. Yeah? So just tell us about that work. What were the things there that made you so effective?
I think we made complex things really simple. So it's like coming from a values base. So we would go into whānau home and we would train our young Māori people in healthy home education, but what's the point in going into a home and not being actually able to provide any solutions? So it was about going, okay, how can we do this in a new and innovative way? So we went out and pitched for philanthropic funding, so it's actually like, here's the problems and this is what we can do to solve them for you. I think what was really interesting as well is that we hired a young team and an all Māori team, which brought a different flavour. So actually 80% of the people coming through for whareore at that time were Māori, and so it only makes sense then to have competent young Māori be able to lead that process. What we found was through that process is people felt really well listened to, they felt valued, they felt acknowledged, and that they felt then comfortable to engage with other services afterwards, which was a really interesting space. But I think one of the things that made us unique and different is we didn't just go, look, here's the scope, and we fit within that. We said actually what makes sense and what works for whānau, and then we'll just align to your scope, but we're actually going to do what makes sense. So we didn't fit that script, and we said, if our vision is strong, the resource and money will follow. Yeah, so if our vision's strong and we can communicate that effectively, we should be able to get what we need.
And what impact did you make?
So in the first study, when we first started out in our first 2 years of pilot, we actually we had a pilot of 400 children who had come through to the hospital, and we reduced the readmission rate for those children through our program to 1.25. So often what would happen is children come in for respiratory conditions and then keep coming in. So you get unwell, you go back home, you get unwell again, and then come back. So we were able to reduce that, say, from 40% down to 1.25% after interventions were put in play. And that was a large proportion of Māori whānau coming through, which was great too. So even though Māori at that time, when we started, were at 23% of the population, 80% of the babies coming in for avoidable child hospital admissions were Māori. So we were able to make real impact in that space for our people.
Well done. And do you think the key thing was having the young Māori engage with that? What were the things that you did differently than because I know other organisations did not have those figures, right?
Yeah, I think it was a component of stuff. I think it was we chose people with heart. So we chose people who had even come from those conditions growing up, so they had empathy, they had understanding of those environments and good emotional intelligence, knowing how to communicate effectively with those audiences. We had people with drive, we had really good team players. So that was a component of that, and the fact that they were Māori meant that they could communicate to an audience in different ways. And actually, Māori are complex because not everybody is ingrained in every single way. You have urban Māori who are disconnected from their culture as well. So it's not just one group of people. So we had that within our team. And I think what was great about that was we understood each other's strengths. And I also taught every single team member how to pitch an idea so it wasn't reliant on one person. But I think our big belief was what is the right thing to do, even when no one's looking. So we had a case come through that was just unreal. We had rheumatic fever, children sleeping in the home, like literally leaking, you could see outside, all of that stuff. But they didn't actually meet the criteria. Ethically, that is not okay, right? And so we just made exception cases for things like that. So we thought, if this hit the paper tomorrow, that was our thing. If this hit the paper tomorrow, what would we be doing? And how do we do that?
The criteria?
There's complexities in the criteria. There was a strict criteria you had to meet.
Right.
And so, there's just sometimes things don't work, and you just need to be a little bit creative about how we would get there. But our whakaaro was always that what is the right thing to do, even when no one's looking, and then how would we do that? Yeah. So we just kept things really simple, and we did them well.
Erana, what's the... Did you get down through that process at times? Did you get burned out?
No, well, one of the things that I think that my mum taught me actually that was really important while in a DHB environment was the DHBs, or any big government organisations, they're a big beast. And so what tends to burn people out when you have a lot of passion and drive is that after a period of time you start to get a bit worn down because you're not seeing the traction or the movement that you want to make, and there's constant change in strategic direction and things like that. So one of the things that I held really strongly onto was let's be a pocket of excellence that can influence change. So I was very clear about what we were trying to achieve and what was possible to achieve within that. So rather than trying to change the whole system, I said let's do our stuff really well and show a different way of working. So that's kind of how I kept my drive and passion moving in that space, so I could see traction internally, and I knew where we were placed within the space.
And you learned that from your mum. So shout out to Shelly, who's done some fabulous work in DHB and the whole range of... So tell me about the influence that Shelly's had on you.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because I always, even from a really young age, found myself in leadership positions, and I never quite understood it. I just found leadership quite easy, like it just worked, and I never really understood why I was always put in leadership positions or why I just found those things quite easy. And what I realised is I call it like Mr. Miyagi, like she was doing things since we were kids that I had no idea about. Like we were doing affirmations since 5 years old. So it was around that positive self-talk. It was around like all our leadership values and how we operated. Those were all being instilled in us since we were kids. I had no idea. I thought it was normal that people were doing affirmations at 5 years old, So if we heard a put down or we'd put ourselves down, we had to replace it with 3 positive affirmations. So we were doing that really young. So I think the stories that we tell ourselves and our narrative was really worked on from a young age. So I'd say that's probably the most powerful piece Mum has given us. But also, it's quite interesting. I'd spoken to someone not that long ago who talked about like different leaders and their experience of CEOs and leaders, and they hadn't had a great experience of CEOs, so they had a lens over what that was in terms of leadership. And I thought, that's quite interesting, how has she developed that narrative? Because actually I was surrounded by strong Māori leaders, strong wahine leaders my whole life, and that's kind of what I had seen. So I didn't really know, I didn't have the same narrative because I know it's possible and I've seen it in action. So I was quite lucky being surrounded by really strong mana wahine leaders who led the way in really hard times, so that we could then take the next step. And when I had a conversation with my mum, actually, she had said to me, you were destined to be a leader because that's how we created the space for you, and you have a responsibility to do that.
Does that get heavy sometimes?
Not so much. I don't know why. I think that I went to a Māori leadership kaupapa actually, because when I think I was about 22, 23, as I talked about, leadership, always opportunities came to me, and I never really wanted them. I was just like, well, whatever, and I just got placed in them. And I think one of the founding things for me that I found in leadership, which it changed my perspective, was that I had thought that I had misinterpreted leadership and management. So leading from the top all by yourself in that older style was just not my jam. I was just not into it. But when she had framed it for me in terms of the component of a leader is to grow other leaders, then I could get on board with that. So I think the whakaaro of you have a responsibility to be a leader and to be an ethical leader and do best with the information you have in front of you at the time, while at the same time the core component of your leadership is to grow other leaders. And I'm like, oh sweet, I can do that. Because it's not just about me, right? I'm far more energised about others than I am about myself.
I remember the impact you had on Renapatu, who was in your CQ team. And I remember talking to him some meetings after. Was he there before you or after?
Before.
Yeah. I remember when you joined the team and talking to Red a couple of meetings after, and he's just like, man, she puts so much pressure on me. And it was all in a good context. It was just like, man, she is irresistible. Because I remember, I think you helped him connect more back with his culture, the Maori culture, because he was very connected to the Pākehā culture and he'd shied away. And yeah, that was something that that was a big deal for him. That was a big deal for him. And he was like, she just won't give up.
Yeah, I don't even know I'm doing it. Yeah.
It was just, and look, it was a lovely thing to see that influence. Yeah. How much does the Maori culture influence you as a leader?
I think that, like, it encapsulates probably me as a person. What I love, we've heard is our beautiful leaders from the past. It's not about aho, it's about koutou. So there's a lot, I think, of the values system that I live by that I probably don't even think about, but it just is. So I think it's probably embodied in that way. I love the concepts and values of our people around togetherness. So one of the things I really like in terms of leadership is that there's no point in me succeeding on my own. You need to bring the whole unit with you, And so I really like, dreams in isolation are just dreams, but actually if we dream together, think of what can be achieved. And so I think, I probably don't think of them like that in that context or that way, but I think that they probably live inside me in terms of my values and how I make decisions, maybe without even thinking about it.
Was that always there?
Probably. That's an interesting question because I think being Māori and growing up in different environments, it just is, but probably looking from a different view, that's interesting. But yeah, I think that's probably always been the case. I've been really lucky. I've had lots of family members around me from a really young age, but very colourful environments that they came from. So I think they brought different perspectives. Even though a large proportion of them are Māori, they brought different, unique things to the table to learn from.
Erana, this has just dropped onto my head. I hear this a lot recently. There's a lot of people feeling quite confronted or uncomfortable with the rise of the Maori culture in New Zealand and not understanding it, and it's all getting a bit uncomfortable, which is cool. And I've heard this term. So your father was Pākehā, or is Pākehā?
I've got 3 dads.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So talk us through that.
So I've got 2 Māori papa. I guess one's, half mostly Māori, the second one, and then a Pākehā papa. Yeah.
Okay. And so how do you blend all that together?
All of the different worlds?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's probably something that my mum and wider whānau unit have done incredibly well. In terms of my papa's whānau, I grew up with them, and they're different. And then I have my papa atawhai, my second papa, who I was raised with since I was kind of like that 3 years old mark, and that was easy as well. And then had my third papa around age 12 and grew up with them. But I think what was important, and that my mum and him did very, very well, was around the narrative and language. So they never said, like, my kids or your kids. It was always our kids. And I think that was incredibly important because there wasn't a segregation. Do you know what I mean? Even my nanny from my third papa, you know, she was Pākehā, she was super old school, you know, but people would come in and say, oh, that's not your real granddaughter. And she's like, no, that's my granddaughter, right. You know. And so I was quite lucky, even though she was probably brought up in a really different way than what I was. The whānau element connected us. So, I never felt weird or different like that. Yeah, it worked out all good.
What? And we'll get on to your role that you do now, which sounds fascinating, because this is the first time I have been here. Might be the last time I'm here. Mm-hmm. But I'm really interested in this new space that you're in. Yeah, let's go there now. Mm-hmm. So tell us about this role that you're in now. So you're now a mother. Yeah. Yeah, big smile.
Yeah.
You finished with the DHB.
Mm-hmm.
Had a baby. Mm-hmm. And then you've started this role.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you do now?
Yeah, so my title's operations manager, but I actually do like 0% operations, but there you go. I would say my best description of it would be that I do projects that haven't been done, that are in the grey, and I kind of operate it almost like a startup mentality. Mm-hmm. So at the moment, we have Here to Help You, we have the Houchin Community Wellbeing Space, and then we're setting up a youth space as well, which is going to be incredible. So I'm leading those 3 projects at the moment. So when we came out here, actually, I think my daughter was 2 days old, and I got a call from my boss. I was still at the DHB. Got a call from my boss saying, hey, do you want a new job? We're going to do this community wellbeing space. It hasn't been done, and it's going to be out the gate. Are you interested? And I'm like, yep. And so I was like, boom. So pretty much 3 months went into handing my notice, and then started my job here. Moved in to start the role in February, and COVID hit in March. Yeah. So it was like big changing environment. But actually in March I was deployed into community. So we were actually in the room we're sitting in today. I was in this room when Level 4 was announced with our leaders, and pretty much exactly at that time they said, you're now deployed into community, just go have a tutu. I was like, okay, perfect, that's a bit of me. And so pretty much like 1 month on the job, was deployed into community, found ourselves in the middle of the emergency kai space for Waikato and Hamilton. And so the advantage of that was that we could use our skills to look at a system rather than be doing the mahi. So we actually mapped the emergency kai system really early in the piece when COVID hit. What we found was 400 to 500% of kai providers were, so kai providers in Hamilton were seeing a 400 to 500% increase in food need. Yep. And 70% of providers were either not in operation or in limited operation. So pretty much no one in the kai system could hold it, and no one entity could do it alone. So we wrote this up really quickly, got a strategy, got people together, got providers' voices heard, set up Claudelins, and distributed 457,000 meals to Waikato whānau in 9 weeks. So that was a body of work. 457,000, yeah. So that was cool, that was rocking. And so we were doing like 20-hour days every day for 9 weeks. It was just crazy. But what was really cool about that was that providers' voices could get heard. So my sister worked for Salvation Army, and I said, look, how do we not botch this? Because what tends to happen is people want, you know, like people come in and they're a hero, and then they leave and they just decimate a system. And so I said, look, how do we not do that? How do we actually help in a real tangible way? And she says, we know the people, we're going to be here when you leave, we're going to be doing this when you leave. So actually all we need is the resource. If you let us focus on just getting it out, we don't have the capacity to make up the boxes required, we don't have the staff, we don't have the volunteers, we just need the resource, we'll get it out. So that's essentially the model we adopted, which just says we'll have a hub that will do that in a really safe way, because also you need 2 metres distance, total ambiguity in terms of how to create and do that in a safe way, and then our providers distributed that contactlessly. So we did that, and then the second component of what we did in that time was we had the call from providers because COVID exacerbated issues that were already there in the community.
Yep.
So we were having new people asking for support who had never asked for support before, and that's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah.
And then also people were having to go to multiple providers, but everyone's at 400 to 500% capacity, so all the systems are blocked. And so people were getting like 4 or 5 no's before actually being able to access support. And so they said, look, can we have a system just to navigate this? So our amazing tech genius developer developed Here to Help You in like 3 weeks, like with no face-to-face contact. It's unreal. And then our amazing comms person made everything beautiful, set it at the average reading age of a 12-year-old really easy. So the concept was, how could we make asking for help as easy as ordering a pizza? So like really taking that mindset on. So often stuff's really complex. So essentially it was an online platform. With just over a year now, we've expanded into Tauranga. So we've just launched Tauranga Bay of Plenty, started in Waikato. We supported almost 9,000 people with like mostly 1.5 FTE. Like incredible. So we've connected people. So how it works is a whānau come through, they say, this is who I am and this is what I need. And then a trained connector with mental health background, social background, will give the whānau a call, dive a bit deeper into what it is that they need. So they often say, I start with Kai, and then actually I'm needing some mental health support, and then I'm needing this and that. And so they start with one space. They then send it through to providers who are signed in the back end of the site, who can say, I'll give you 40 cases per week. I have capacity, I don't have capacity. The system will look at it based on closest proximity, so a whānau's not being sent over the other side of town, and they're only being sent to providers who can accept them and take them. So it's like, this is what I want, all the legwork's done in the background, connected, done. So yeah, that's what we did through COVID anyway, and then came back to start Helchin.
Do you miss that space?
Miss what?
That excitement of putting it all together.
Yeah, it's interesting because I felt like at that time, it's interesting. I felt like at that time, things were moving really slowly, but your concept of time's so out the gate. So it's like in 5 days, we had mapped the entire ecosystem, written a strategy, and were starting to set up crawl-ins, but it felt really slow. I remember feeling like, just go, and I had to call my boss and being like, hey, can you back me 200 grand in case I can't find the money to like do this? I think I will, but yeah, can you back us 200 grand? Because if you don't, there'll be thousands of people going hungry. And she was like, yeah, go for it. But I remember feeling in that moment like things were moving really slowly, but actually they were moving in hours, you know? So I enjoy getting those hard things over the line. I enjoyed in that time frame doing things and getting things over the line that weren't the normal. And I think that like lots of people have said, why wouldn't we have done Here to Help You earlier? Like, it's a really logical, easy thing, right? And I said, well, in BAU environments, things like this don't tend to fly, especially in these sectors. So it actually took an emergency to really allow space for those things to grow. Yeah.
And so what's the legacy of that now?
Yeah, so like my concept is I believe if we can do Here to Help You really, really well and nail a localities-based model, and a model that works for our people, there's no reason it couldn't be taken to the rest of the world. So essentially it's going, let's make accessing support as easy as ordering a pizza. Like it should be that easy for you to get what you need. Interesting,
because, I mean, we don't need pizza,
you
know,
right?
But we do that. But we do, you know, you put the entrepreneurial flair on it, and it's amazing how, you know, to make it as easy as possible. I remember I had a mate years ago who trained, my age, old, and he trained at Woolworths.
Yeah.
When Woolworths was very, very uncool, right? And he trained there as a training manager, and we used to take the piss out of him, you know, this job. But as he said, the things that he learnt there, and one of them was it was pissing with rain one day, and his boss said, "See those carts outside? Go and get those and bring them back in here, so it makes it easier for people to, get the trolleys and stuff like that, right?" And it was always about making it easier for the customer. Make it easier for the customer. And that absolutely embedded in him. And where he's taken that mentality from there, but that was embedded really early on. So when you say ordering pizza and going, we don't need that, but here to help we do.
Yeah.
But how often do we make essential things bureaucratically stupid?
Yeah. It's flipping that model, I think, is about going, let's make it as easy and effective as possible for people, almost if you think of it as a base customer service, customer-centric, and then actually we have the slick systems behind us to make it as efficient as possible, but put the whānau first and do incredible systems at the back so that they can actually get deliverables in a day. One of the cases that come through that I think is an incredible way of doing things differently is we had a man come through here to help you who was just recently homeless, had no kai and had lost his job. And so he had put a request through here to help you. Now, if he was to come through any service provider's door, that is an incredible amount of work to navigate that process. And actually, even if somebody's experience is only in one of those lanes, to navigate all of those pieces is a big body of work. And so our connector at the time sent him for an emergency kai meal that night, so a hot meal that night, sent a food parcel to him that was conducive to the streets the following day, and then sent him through to the People's Project where they found him an emergency accommodation. And because all of those pieces of work were done, he found himself a job. So within 3 days, he was housed, had kai, and had employment. And I don't believe Here to Help is the answer to everything, but that is a solution that worked for him, that took less pressure off providers in the community, and was really quick to get a result. And she did that all from her computer.
I was just thinking the cost benefit to the nation, not to mention improving his life, it was huge, right? It was huge. Was it exciting? Did you find it exciting?
I love it, yeah. It's totally my jam. I think I've never had a career plan or anything like that. I've always just gone, I'm going to go where I can support whānau and grow and develop the next generation of leaders in New Zealand. So however I do that and however that happens is where I'll roll. So I don't have too much of a plan of that.
So COVID is still around.
Yeah.
But your job is now more business as usual now? No? Yeah,
I love it. Here to Help You's now flourishing and rolling into different places. So we only go where people ask us to go. So the next call is to Northland, I think they're interested. Hawke's Bay, Rotorua have had conversations, and Auckland is interested, South Auckland. So there's conversations happening in different spaces. So we're launching into other areas. They'll create their own space. But as the team get bigger, we're building in their systems, and then I'll rock on to the other projects. So so I always kind of try and understand where my flair is and where I can add most value to the team, and then actually build the strong systems and structure, build the PO, and then the team can carry on the kaupapa.
Where do you get the kai from in these situations?
For Here to Help You?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's using the existing kai providers, so who are already providing kai. There's creative ways. They're already doing it, and it's just allowing access. So essentially, one of my favourite things about that particular kaupapa is that it gives the power back to whānau. So you can say, do you want a faith-based service? Do you want a Māori service? Do you want a Pacifica? What is it that you want? And then we can look at who's open and who's in closest proximity to you and how that works. And it gives the power back to the whānau to make that choice, rather than saying, here's just the only person that we know.
Right.
Yeah. So we're not creating the kaupapa ourselves, we're connecting people to stuff.
What frustrates you the most in the professional space?
I think what frustrates me the most is when there's okay, here's the box, or here's the contract, or people making decisions who don't understand how things work on the ground, or also they use money as the constraint for the thinking. So I prefer a more open space where we can get curious about what the possibilities are and putting whānau first. That would be what frustrates me, probably closed-mindedness. And also a lack of urgency to do kaupapa. So, or a lack of urgency to make decisions that will make impact for our people.
When you talk about our people, who do you mean?
It's expanded now that I've got a beautiful Pacifica daughter. But I mean New Zealanders as a whole. That's probably how I think. I mean, I always use our because I think of our people, but I'm thinking of Aotearoa. I have a strong affinity to Māori and I have a strong affinity to Pacifica now, but actually as a whole, anyone who requires the needs and support should actually get access to those freely.
It's interesting. I've had this conversation earlier today with another Maori woman talking about how generous the Maori culture is. It's phenomenal how inclusive you are just naturally. It's an interesting thing. And yet it scares people. I don't get it.
Yeah.
But
what don't you get?
Well, I don't get why people are a lot. There are some white people out there who are really intimidated by Māori, and are threatened by it. And I'm not sure what that's about. Maybe just not having enough personal interaction with Māori. I don't know. But it doesn't make sense to me.
I guess it's, I think, what is it? My boss was saying to me the other day is that people can deal with hard stuff, but they can't deal with ambiguity. And so I think that's part of that narrative, right? And that piece of not knowing or not understanding. I mean, I've been in several situations where I could have got really angry and annoyed and responsive and, to some of the things that were happening, but knowing that actually that person, their perspective and where they are right now is based on what they know and what's in their environment. So they're not educated in the same way that I'm educated, do you know what I mean? Yeah. So there's discussions are different. So if I just get up and, this is just my own personal about how I deal with things when they come up, is that actually let's open lines of discussion. Do you know what I mean? Let's have an interesting conversation and let's work on that over time. I've even found it in some of my own staff members in the past where they actually haven't worked with any Māori before. And so their lens on the world or doing things is way different to how it is that I do them. And so actually it's like, cool, let's go on that journey. And let's go on that journey together. We operate all of our teams like a whānau. So it's like if one person goes down, the team will lift you up and we go together and we move forward as a unit and no one person's left behind. And so some of those concepts about how we operate in a team are even quite different. And so bringing people along on that journey and being like, okay, you are where you are because of the experiences and things that you've had in your world. Let's walk this journey together.
Sounds easy.
Yeah. So it's sometimes frustrating. That's just my own thing. I think that you need multiple people within a system. Some will be the ones the outliers who will stand up and challenge and do all of those things. Some will, prefer to work in relationships and take people on a journey. I think you need multiple people across the system to create change. So there's probably no one way to solve it. That's just how I tend to do it.
So I walked in here today and the first person I see is Brogan.
Yeah.
Right? And you guys have worked together for a long time together.
Yeah.
Tell me about that connection between you two.
Yeah, I love Brogan. She's incredible. We first met when we were at DHB. I actually connected her to her husband, so I have 100% success rate in matchmaking. So we're incredible. What I really like about Brogan is that, she is values-based. So we really connect because we're opposite in a lot of ways. She's
You're
an introvert.
opposite in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So she's introverted.
Like she's nice.
Yeah. Oh, come on, man. I'm lovely. Yeah, but I think we work really well together, and we were friends outside of mahi as well, and so lots of people had told me that wasn't going to work, but one thing I think we can both do incredibly well is kind of compartmentalise the two roles that we have. So one of the things we do is we walk on a Monday morning at 8:30, and that half an hour walk with us is only personal stuff. So we just talk, do all of that stuff. So it's like our first conversation is not going to be a mahi conversation. So we're very clear that actually we are friends out and we value that, but when we're at mahi, we do mahi and we're for the people, and then when we step outside of that, we're friends, But I think we're both values-based, we both work really hard, so it works for us, we just fluked it.
What does values-based mean to you?
I think, people operate from different values, right? In a sense, we all operate from different values. I think some of my values are around integrity. So probably doing the right thing, even if it's the hard thing to do, or even when no one's looking, what's the right thing to do, based on, that. I also think that I put people first. I try and think about our whānau and the betterment of our people, and I put that in decision making. Try and focus on really doing the basics well, like around manaakitanga. Sometimes and that's a word that is chucked around heaps, which is quite annoying, but it's actually so beautiful in its concept, because I think we rush around doing whole lots of stuff and we forget to do some of those basic things about making people. So tell me what
manaakitanga is to you.
Oh, that means different things, right? It's really complex, but I think of how I see manaakitanga in action as I think of my grandmother, where you come to her whare and there's a beautiful kai, there's cup of tea, you have a warm bed, It's about making sure we look after people, we take care of people. And I try and think of what that means in action. And so, I just think about how do we look after our people and what does that look like? So it's about and I think we do that with me and Brogues, like our first conversation's not mahi, it's not that stuff, it's actually, how are you? Let's have a cup of tea, the real basic stuff.
Yeah. I went on my first hikoi the other day.
Oh, beautiful.
And it was really interesting. It was great. And we ended up with a good result.
Yep.
So this is around the Maori wards and the Manawatu, and council changed their initial decision because of the hikoi.
Yeah.
It does, it was interesting that we shouldn't have had to need to go on hikoi, but we did.
Yeah.
And look, it was really interesting afterwards, reflecting on that I hear the term being a good ancestor, is something that is really important to Maori and Maori culture. And that really resonated with me that day, is that the people were not marching that day for themselves.
Yeah.
They were marching for generations to come.
Yeah.
All right? And it gives a whole different lens to it.
Yeah.
And it seems you can't see that, but you can feel that. It's an interesting thing. And it's quite a different motivation piece as well. Yeah. And it gives a longer lens from that point of view as well. So, Erana, what's your future? Where are you heading?
Fantastic question. I don't know. I always had this crazy, my concept to myself that I always thought about was that I would retire at 50. I would spend from now 30 to 50 gaining as much skills and knowledge as I can, and then retire at 50, go into Māori orgs, Pacifica orgs, or any orgs that need support, really shape up their leadership, shape up their system, structure, all of those things so that they can better deliver for our people. That was always what I wanted to do.
Retire?
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like retirement.
Well, it's not retirement. Well, I think I want to go and support the people that can make real impact in our communities and, really put in those good structures, good values, good people and culture, leadership systems, operating systems, and kind of like leading edge stuff and start to grow and develop those leaders so that they can thrive for our people. I'd love to be doing that, but I don't want to be directed by funding, I don't want to be all of that stuff, so I just want to go do it, out of aroha and with a focus of impact.
So do you think you can do that? So you talk about retirement as not earning an income anymore.
Yeah. So
that's Longu's job.
Yeah. Right? Oh, no. Well, no. I saw it as both of us. Okay. Yeah.
Does he know this?
Yeah. So we've smashed out our mortgage, so our mortgage will be paid in 2.5 years, and we'll have his mum's mortgage paid in 3 years.
Right on.
And then, we're going to start building, spend the 20 years smashing all of that stuff out, so actually we can live the life that we want to live. We're not people who need loads. But then also so that's the greater vision, is that it won't require money. The kids will have what they need. We want to help our sisters and our wider whānau buy their own whare. I need to learn more about investing. I'm obsessed with strategic finance. I just love seeing how money works and how you can do it better. Even as a kid, I'd ask people, how much? That's a nice couch. How much does that cost? Like, really weird. I love spreadsheets. I listen to financial books. I'm just all about it.
You're an odd extrovert.
I know, it's very weird. Like, I love planning strategically how I can make things work better and look better. And, I know that if I get our mortgage out of the way, then we can help the wider whānau unit and bring everyone forward.
Spooky.
Yeah.
So apart from that,
Yeah.
what makes you so special?
What makes me special? Well, it's funny, actually. This was a CQ question. It said, you have to rate yourself out of 10 or whatever. And I was like, I'm a 10. And I think it was one of the questions or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it says, rate yourself out of 10. And I'm like, I'm a 10. And Mum's like, why are you rating yourself a 10? And my kōrero whakaaro to that was, I'm a 10 because I'm a reflection of those around me. And so if I rate myself low, then I'm rating those who have inputted into who I am as a person as low, whereas I'm a reflection of my experiences and those around me, so that's why I rate myself a 10. Super weird. Mum's like, no room for improvement. I'm like, no, every day I'm a different 10. Yeah.
So you didn't answer my question, though.
Yeah.
What makes you so special?
What makes me special? I think that I've always believed that I am here to contribute to others. So I've known that from a really young age. And I feel like my superpower is like I can help people see their light. Like I'm like the ultimate cheerleader. Like I can grow and develop leaders like a boss. I can do it. So I'm really good at helping build confidence in others, helping them see their own leadership potential. See their own light. That's not my light for them, it's their own light. So I'm good at helping people discover that, like a boss.
I believe that. It's interesting. I'm sitting there going, yeah, that's cool. What else do you want to talk about this morning, Erana?
What would you like to talk about, Hub?
I am interested in what it's like being a young Maori woman growing up.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that, the journey will be different for everyone, right? What I noticed is I'm usually the youngest in the leadership room by at least 20 years, and often tend to be one of either the only Māori or one of very few Māori at the table. I had this weird complex, I think, with the way that I looked, because when I was younger and I was sitting at leadership tables, the first thing they'll be like, oh, so are you taking the minutes, bub? Or, doing that stuff. And I'm like, no, cuz I'm leading the meeting. So there was assumptions I think people make about you. And then what I noticed was, or there was kind of the catty stuff growing up as well, even from your own peers. So even from some of my younger Māori colleagues, they would be like, oh, she only got where she was because of who her mum is, or she only got where she was because of what she looks like, or stuff like that. So what I noticed was, when I had put on weight, I developed this weird-ass thing. When I'd put on weight, I found that I could penetrate different markets. People took me more seriously.
Really?
Yeah, it was really weird. And so it fueled this narrative that I had that as a bigger woman, I could serve more because people, there wasn't that same, people took me more seriously in a room, do you know?
Wow.
I don't know, it was really weird. And so it started to fuel this.
Do you think that's true?
I think elements of that was true, but I think it's an age thing and I was probably doing the younger thing and the Māori thing and all of that stuff. There's the catty stuff that you have when you're younger too. But I think it fueled ideas. So I don't think that every component of that was incorrect, but I think when you do see something that validates a story that you have, then it continues to grow, right?
That's why I asked, do you think it's true?
Yeah, so, I think that what it enabled me to do was, being the narrative that I had is when you're a bigger, confident woman, then you can penetrate and do different stuff. But when I was fit and healthy and thriving in all of these things, plus confident and driven, it starts to, people treat you a little bit different, the perception of that. So I found like I could ride the, what is it called? I could ride the wave better when I was bigger and be confident and bold in these spaces, and it would be perceived different by people. That's the narrative I had anyway. Now I've realised it's all rubbish. Yeah.
I was going to say, so you're more motivated to be bigger than smaller.
Right? And then you go, oh, cool, catch pie, cuzzy, it's not ideal. It's not ideal, yeah. And so, it takes a while to unpack those things, right? Yeah. And so, and then I actually, I was in a book, but I met this wahine. I met the wahine who had written a book on a plane, and we were sitting next to each other, and I was talking to her about the stuff, and she goes, so do you know any Māori leaders who are fit and healthy and thriving in their careers? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, well, hello. And I'm like, oh, dang it, true. So yeah, it's quite interesting how we can develop a narrative like that, and then we find things that validate what it is so that we can keep the narrative. Yeah. So it's rubbish. I've realised that now. It only took me 30 years.
Apart from your mum, what wahine do you look to and go, that's cool?
Yeah, there's actually heaps of them. I have my Auntie Minnie, who was a teacher for multiple years. And one of the things that I really love about her is, she will tell you the absolute truth, even when it's, really blunt and hard, and will, And so I really love her integrity, but also her follow-through over long periods of time. Really caring, good empathy, and things like that. I also had another wahine leader who's one of my mentors, which is Tanya Hodges. Really enjoy listening to her and her whakaaro and her openness and her challenge and how she challenges in really interesting ways. My Auntie Charlotte does incredible work. So I've been pretty lucky to have a awesome bunch of wahine.
What's the attribute that you admire the most in leaders?
I think it was the attribute. There's a couple of them. I would say the attribute that I align with the most would probably be a blend of integrity and heart. Yeah. So I guess a compass, moral compass, but also doing that from a place of caring and kindness. And people will often say to me, personally, oh, how can you kind of be, how can you, they think it's fearless. Usually I'm like, oh my gosh. But, how do you have confidence to go out there into things that haven't been done? And one of the things that I would say is, if I'm acting with integrity and doing the best with what I have at the moment, and it's for the people and with right intent, I shouldn't have anything to worry about, because actually, if I'm putting people first, then it's all good. Yeah, but I love the concept of heart while also doing things that are tika and or have integrity. That'll be my jam.
We had dinner here, I'm going to say 4 or 5 years ago, on Friday night.
Yeah.
And you asked me a question. Do you remember that? No. So you asked me a question through dinner, and it was just the two of us, and we were talking about some shit, and you asked me out of nowhere whether I had any friends. And I thought, what the fuck? Where's that come from? And so I went, yeah, I do have some friends out, right? Anyway, It really was really interesting. It sat me on my ass. I thought, and I rang Severne-Takataka a few days later, who has been your facilitator, right? I said, Erana asked me this question. I'm trying to work out what to make. And she said, it's just Erana being caring. And I went, okay. Because I started on the story.
Yeah, right.
I'm going on the story going, doesn't anybody like me? What's she trying to tell me like this? I thought I had friends, but maybe I don't. But it was a very... And when I realised, and Sarah said, no, it's just Erana. She's just been caring. I went, okay, and put it to bed. I went, okay. And I thought, don't have any friends. But it was a great question, right? It was a clean question, yeah. And that's the thing that I see in you, is you're very good at asking clean questions. So you can ask stuff that can be quite challenging, but there's no shit behind it. Right, because you know those questions, right? You see people ask a question, go, shit, that's
try to angle you in a corner,
and go, that's actually not a question; it's a statement, right?
Yeah.
And and it's just it ends up in the junk heap, yeah. But that's something that I haven't spent as much time with you as I would like, but that's something that I've seen that you're really good at, is asking those clean questions that sometimes are a bit wacky.
Yeah. Put out the gate.
So that you talked about growing up, as a young Maori woman from the point of view in the professional space, but in the personal space, and this is a leading question. I'm not going to pretend it's not, because this is something that I am noticing more and more, and so where I'm going with this, and is that I see the rise of racism at the moment with the discomfort. Right? What's that like at times?
It's hard. I mean, I can give you an experience. So when I was 17, I got head girl of my school. And I heard one of the mothers say to her child next to me, who had also gone for head girl but didn't get it, she only got it because she's Māori. And so you hear those things when you're younger, and it's like instantly you had to grow a thicker skin. Like I had to see that for what it was. And she blatantly had said it loud so I would hear it.
Yep.
She was trying to do that. And so I went up to her and I actually said, no, I didn't get it because I was Māori. I got it because I'm good enough and I'm going to do a great job. So I had to learn not only to grow a thicker skin, but learn how to communicate effectively when I would see those things, so it was really interesting. But what was cool was my Pākehā pāpai at the time. I'd gone home because even though you can grow a thick skin, it doesn't mean it doesn't affect you or wear on you. And so I'd gone home and told my whānau, and, my mum's like, not ideal, and but my papa, who is, Pākehā, he was really fueled up by it, and he went down to the, he went down and, hit her up, in front of everybody. And, what I loved about that was I felt like my papa was sticking up for me, even though I didn't need it. It was nice to see him as a Pākehā man step up for me, his daughter, and he was standing in that and told her, and she had to come and apologise to me. It was pretty hard out. But, so I think that's something. It's like, just because you have to grow a thick skin doesn't mean that it doesn't affect or hurt you in different ways. And actually people's experience of that's really different. And so, I think of how my mama talks about it when they just started in Māori health 20 years before me. Me and my mum actually had the same role 20 years apart. But actually the environment they had to operate to get things moving for Māori was completely different. It was just a whole nother space. And so I could never compare our experiences in terms of what we're trying to achieve in terms of Māori development compared to what she was having to do, because they opened the gate for us. So I think as we go through, there will be different experiences for different people.
Do you think it was harder for her getting it started than what you worked in?
I think they're harder in different ways. So I'd say it's hard to compare two different things because probably it was more overt then.
Yep.
But as I was coming through, I can only speak from my experience. As I was coming through, it sits there, but it sits in different ways. So people just use a different language. Yeah, so to say almost the same thing, but sometimes it's harder to spot, or it's harder for others to see when it's not as overt, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to say whether things are harder or easier, but like what I can say is they definitely open the door, open the narrative. So probably from an advancement point of view was easier for me in my particular kaupapa because they'd done the groundwork, you know. So I think, I have to mihi to those who have gone before us, because actually would have been you would have got a lot of no's, a lot of pushing, there would have had to be a lot of fighting and a lot of stepping up and doing those things. Even for us to have those conversations, yeah.
And then as things evolve, you've got to change the style as the situation changes, right? It's I had a conversation last week with a really impressive Maori man who, he talked about growing up and the fight that he had to
100%.
had to get through. And he realised that he was still using those old techniques, even though he had reached a certain level.
Yeah.
And it was like a reflection, or maybe I need to start actually developing some different strategies. Yeah. They worked back then.
Yeah. Different now,
yeah.
And that's why I said, how there's different spectrums of people you need in the ecosystem, right? And there are the people who will stand up and yell out or call stuff or do the shocking stuff, and that's cool. And then you also need people who go, let's have a journey and a conversation and let's walk through that together. You'll have multiple people who deal with the same thing differently. I don't think there's one way to do that, but I know that definitely they would have had to be more overt. Well, that's what I've heard anyway.
Yep.
They would have had to be more overt then, because actually it was more overt. But I often think about as well, like with my husband who's Tongan, and their parents are from Tonga. They were born in New Zealand. So they're living those two worlds, right? And then... and so you live and you come to the mainstream system and you're living in New Zealand while your parents are still living the traditional Tongan life. And that's a complex in itself because you live those two different worlds. And then also, to add another layer on that, then our daughter will be half of those components. And so some of the things that we've heard and some of the things that I've tried to think about is kind of... you never sit almost in one camp. So in the Tongan world, she'll be half Māori. In the Māori world, she'll be half Tongan. And so what does that look like as they grow up? And what's our best way to help her feel really accepted in those worlds and really confident to stand in who she is as a person, but also have equal ability to know herself and stand strong in those spaces. So... her first reo at the moment, I'm outnumbered by the Tongans who surrounded me about our papakoinga, but her first reo was Tongan, and then Māori, and then English. So.
Do you think, as a nation, we're heading in the right direction with embracing the different cultures?
I think the generations are changing a little bit. I'm not an expert on this over the whole range of things, but I do think that the younger generation is far more open-minded and accepting, but also if you think about it, we're having far more blended families, right? So even myself being with a Tongan, our baby is half Pacifica, so we're seeing far more blending of that. I don't think you'll ever be able to say that, maybe we've eradicated it fully, because you can't just do 100% of something, right? So there'll always be outliers. But I think that there is opening of discussions, and there's different ways of progressing and moving things forward, but it depends on what lens you look at it from, which is about as grey as an answer you can get.
I saw an interesting thing recently. A mate was up watching his son playing soccer against another school. So these were two predominantly white schools, private prep schools, and they were playing soccer and hockey and rugby. And the two rugby teams at the beginning started off with a haka. And one haka was from the South Island team, and their haka had been designed for them, and the team up here, same thing. And I was looking at that and going, you can't stop that now. that here are these 11 and 12-year-old boys loving the fact that they had learnt a haka and performing a haka to each other, and this is new, and these are very predominantly white schools, and I'm going, there it is right there, you know.
I think it was even prevalent when I went to my first CQ group where Ren was a part of, and I think on our first meeting I said, so who's ever been to a marae and how comfortable did you feel to go to one? And actually no one had really ever been, and actually there was big debate about not doing it, because you go from a space where you have the power and authority, and now you go onto a marae, you've got zero of that. You know absolutely nothing, and you're not the kingpin, right? So there's huge issues there. But what we found was, as we were going on that journey as a rōpū, is that some of the children of those people knew their basic pepeha. You know, they knew some of these things. They were having conversations. So our younger generation, and the parents were actually sometimes learning from the kids.
Yep.
And I thought that was quite an interesting space, right?
Yep.
That the kids were singing Māori songs, they knew basics of certain things and were actively using those even within their household. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, and look, it's over my lifetime, I see just an enormous change, and I think it's all good. You know, I don't. Yeah, I really do think it's really good. Yeah. Erana, we need to sign off soon.
Oh, cool.
Oh, cool.
No.
What? Before we do, is there any last thought, comment?
No, not so much. I think that, one of the things I'm really interested in at the moment is around social connections and the importance of that towards our own personal well-being. So we've been kind of diving into the well-being space here in our second kaupapa, and I think that's just quite an interesting piece, and I think that's quite a nice thing to think about in terms of quality relationships and connections to other people and how important that is in our life. I've heard people just recently as well, like we're doing all this research, but I've heard people actively say, I can be in a room of people and feel absolutely alone, like I'm the only one in the room. And I think that's quite interesting conversations to explore in terms of how our people can be hyper-connected while at the same time being really disconnected.
Yep.
That's my jam at the moment.
Yep. And the flow-on effect of, helping people to connect more, because I had this conversation with Dr. Nick Coop earlier this morning. She asked to have a meeting at 8 o'clock this morning.
She's amazing.
What's with that?
Yeah, that's where it's at.
And she was in Jandals. It was 8 degrees. She was in Jandals. I'm just going, stop that.
I'm about it.
And anyway, she had done her PhD on belonging and I hope I've got that right. It was something like that. I'm thinking, oh God, she might listen to this.
Yeah, she will.
Nick, if I haven't said that right, I apologise now. Right. So anyway, we had a really interesting conversation because I've just halfway through reading a book called Belonging, and it's written by a guy who lives overseas. He's Maori.
Oh, cool.
Anyway, it's wonderful because he infused a whole lot of Maori culture in there. So it's an international framework. But I really think that some people have no idea how to belong to anything. I see that with some people coming through collective intelligence who actually don't know how to connect as a team. Right? And they, you talk about the heart before and so forth, is that everything's been a transaction. And so you can just leave a transaction.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'm really interested in how do we develop that school, or actually go, if you want to belong, these are the things you need to be able to do, and break it down to give people some help, because I think lots of people don't know how to connect, and that screaming to. Technically we're more connected than ever, right? So you and I could connect last night and get me organised because I wasn't organised, but to through that, right? So that's sort of connection, but it's not connection at all, right? It's just technology, right? And seeing people, so I love hugging people, right? Now, not everybody likes that, but to me it's a big deal. Because it's the connection of hearts and all that sort of stuff, right? But it's a big deal for me. So I think there is a big gap there at the moment that people need help with. How do I do this thing?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting because it's like, that whakaaro around kind of people do better when they know better. So if they've only ever seen or done those things before, then kind of that's what they know. So actually, what role can CQ play in terms of creating environments for people to learn how to do things differently? Because if your world has always been transactional, then that's what you know.
So that's a piece that's really dropped for me today. Sometimes I've got to hear things half a dozen times before they go, And so this meeting with Nick this morning, I was just like, boom, got up. That's something I'm going to work on, is bringing that to the fore with the teams and say, what do we need to do? What actions to actually belong here? And so that when we're together, we are acting more like a family than a team. So I've called them teams, but maybe that's the wrong word. Maybe the word is whānau. Right?
Well, it's interesting, right? So when I met my darling, he comes from a traditional Tongan household, and I'm sure they would have loved a traditional Tongan woman to go with it. So they weren't a fan of us being together before they knew me. And one of the things that my dad said that was really important was that he said, it's okay if they don't like you now because they don't know you. But once they get to know you and they know who you are and they know your heart, they will have to love you, right? And so I think that's part about going, it's okay, you haven't had the experience, you don't have the knowledge yet, but actually when we get to know each other, I'm a good person with good ethics, they'll fall in love with you and it'll be fine, And so I think that's similar to that connection of ideas. It's like, it's okay where it's at right now. What could it look like if we did it differently? And let's show you a different way of working rather than just talking about it.
What a great place to end the podcast. Erana, thank you so much for your time. It's nice to see you again.
Yeah.
Lovely seeing Broken. Good luck with your journey going forward. You've just been listening to an episode of Stuff That Matters Now, brought to you by Collective Intelligence. I hope you enjoyed listening to the fun stuff, the rugged stuff, and the complete stuff-ups that have helped this particular Collective Intelligence member evolve while making the world a better place. Do check out our Stuff That Matters Now podcast series on your favourite podcast provider or visit our website www.collectiveintelligence.co.nz to get links to new episodes. Contact us if you want to learn more about how we can help you evolve yourself and others. Thanks for listening.